Emma stepped into Claire and Daniel's warm Colorado home on a chilly Friday evening, expecting nothing more than dinner, laughter, and the comfort of old friendship, unaware that her life was about to tilt in a direction she never imagined. She had known Claire since college, the kind of friendship built through years of shared secrets, road trips, and late-night talks about dreams they were both afraid to admit out loud. Now, in their early 30s, life had taken them on different paths. Sima working long hours in a small marketing firm, Claire married to Daniel, a calm and thoughtful man who balanced her bright energy with quiet strength. But somehow they all remained tethered by a closeness that felt like family. That night the house smelled like garlic and fresh basil, the pasta simmering on the stove while jazz music played softly in the background. They talked quickly, catching up on work and life as if racing through the usual topics just to enjoy being together again. Emma noticed how comfortable Claire and Daniel looked together, how their home felt settled and full, and even though she was genuinely happy for them, she felt a tiny tug of loneliness deep inside, the kind she never voiced aloud. But that feeling drifted to the background when they sat down to eat, laughing about an old college story, the kind only the three of them found funny. And the room buzzed with warm, familiar energy. Yet, under the surface, something felt slightly off. Like a soft tension she couldn't name. A subtle shift in Claire's smile and the way Daniel kept glancing at his wife before speaking. Emma ignored it until after dinner, when they poured a small glass of wine each and moved to the living room, the fireplace flickering in the corner. Claire sat forward, her hands clasped together, and Emma knew immediately that something serious was coming. She had seen that expression before, the one Claire used when she needed to share something big but wasn't sure how it would land. Daniel sat close to her, not touching but supporting her in that quiet way couples do when they are perfectly in sync. For the first time that night, Emma felt her heartbeat pick up, a strange mix of curiosity and unease curling in her chest. She tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but Claire didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at Daniel, and he gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "It's time." Emma straightened in her seat, suddenly aware of every sound in the room, the soft crackle of the fire, the quiet hum of the heater, the distant wind outside. Then Claire spoke, her voice gentle yet trembling just enough to reveal how important this moment was. She began by saying that she and Daniel had been talking about their future, about building a family, and how the journey had been much harder than they ever expected. Emma felt her stomach tighten. She knew they'd been trying for a while, but hearing Claire say it out loud made it real in a way Emma wasn't prepared for. Claire's words came quickly, almost rushed, as if she feared she might lose her courage if she slowed down. And she explained that they had explored different paths, talked to doctors, and faced more emotional setbacks than they could handle alone. Emma reached out instinctively to squeeze her friend's hand, offering comfort without needing details. But instead of relaxing, Claire squeezed back harder and said quietly, "There's something we want to ask you." Emma blinked, caught off guard. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady but full of sincerity, and told her that they trusted her more than anyone, that she had been part of their lives for so long, and that they believed she was the person who could help them in a way that was meaningful and safe. Emma felt her pulse spike as she tried to understand what he meant, the possibilities racing through her mind faster than she could control. Then Claire finally said it. Not dramatic, not complicated, just a soft, trembling sentence that landed like a stone gently dropped into deep water. They wanted Emma to consider becoming their surrogate. The room went still, the air thick with emotion. Emma didn't speak at first because she couldn't. Her mind had jumped into a whirlwind, sorting through shock, confusion, disbelief, and something else she didn't want to name. She stared at her friends, people she loved, people she trusted, and saw that they were terrified of her response. It's as if one word from her could break something delicate between them. She wasn't offended. She wasn't upset. She wasn't angry. She was overwhelmed. Completely, immediately, deeply overwhelmed. She tried to speak, but nothing came out, and Claire rushed to explain, insisting they would never pressure her. Never expect anything, never want to make her uncomfortable. But they had reached a point in their journey where hope felt thin and courage felt borrowed. And Emma had always been the one person who brought steadiness into their lives. Daniel added that they wanted to ask someone they truly respected, someone kind, responsible, and emotionally grounded. Claire added that Emma had the strongest heart of anyone she knew. Emma listened, stunned by their words, stunned by the depth of trust in their voices. And she felt something shift inside her, something both warm and heavy. It wasn't a simple favor. It was life-changing. It was emotional. It was bigger than all of them. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly, unable to give an answer, unable to process the weight of what they were asking, but also unable to ignore the tenderness in their eyes. She felt a strange and sudden ache in her chest, not sadness, but something close to the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing one step could change everything. She excused herself early that night, needing air, needing space, needing silence to understand how a simple dinner had become the doorway to a decision that could reshape all three lives. As she walked to her car under the cold Colorado sky, snowflakes drifting down like quiet little whispers, she knew nothing about her world felt simple anymore. And the question they asked her would not leave her heart untouched. Emma spent the next week in a state of restless confusion, carrying the weight of Claire and Daniel's request like a quiet storm inside her, trying to move through her normal routine while her thoughts raced ahead of her, refusing to settle. She woke up early every morning, hoping that clarity would arrive with the sunrise. But instead, she kept replaying the dinner conversation in her mind, hearing Claire's hopeful voice and Daniel's calm sincerity as if they were standing beside her. She tried to distract herself with work, diving into projects, answering emails, pretending everything was fine. But every break in her day left room for the same question to return. Could she really help them in such a life-changing way? And what would it mean for her own heart? Emma had always been steady, practical, someone who offered support without hesitation, but this was different. This was bigger than anything she had been asked to carry, and the responsibility made her both honored and overwhelmed. On her morning jog, she felt the cold air clear her head for a few minutes. But then her mind drifted back to the image of Claire's face that night, full of hope and fear at the same time, and she felt an ache settle in her chest. A mix of love for her friend and worry that saying yes might change their bond forever. She also thought about her own quiet dreams, the ones she never admitted even to herself, like how she always imagined having a child someday if the right moment ever came, though she knew that moment was nowhere near happening for her. She wondered if helping her closest friend would make that longing stronger or push it deeper, and neither possibility felt easy. She spent evenings sitting on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, drinking tea and staring out the window while snowflakes drifted down the streetlights, asking herself if she could give so much without losing pieces of herself in the process. The emotional pull surprised her, not because she didn't want to help, but because the decision touched corners of her heart she usually kept hidden, corners filled with unspoken hopes and fears she never expected to confront. One night she tried to imagine what their lives would look like if she said yes, Claire finally smiling with relief. After years of disappointment, Daniel being the steady father she always knew he could be, the three of them connected by something deeper than friendship, bound by a decision no one would ever forget. The thought warmed her. But it also scared her because she didn't know if she was ready for that connection or the emotional journey that came with it. And then she imagined saying no, imagined watching Claire's smile fade and Daniel quietly accept the loss. Imagined their friendship staying the same on the surface but carrying an invisible bruise underneath. And that thought hurt more than she expected. She didn't want guilt to shape her choice. But she couldn't ignore how much they meant to her and how much their hope depended on her answer. Every time she passed a family in the grocery store or heard a baby laugh in a cafe, her heart tightened in a confusing mix of compassion and uncertainty. And she realized she was not just deciding for them, but for herself too. One moment she felt brave enough to say yes, ready to give something meaningful. And the next moment she felt scared of losing control over her own emotions. worried she would get attached in ways she couldn't predict. She kept their secret close, telling no one, because she didn't want outside voices shaping a decision that needed to come from her heart alone. At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking of Claire's gentle smile, remembering how many times Claire had supported her through heartbreak, job changes, family struggles, and lonely holidays. Realizing their friendship had carried both of them through so much already. She thought of Daniel too, the way he always listened without judgment, how he spoke with the kind of sincerity that made people feel safe. And she felt a deep respect for him that made the request feel even heavier. The three of them shared something rare, a friendship built over years of quiet loyalty and simple moments that kept them connected. And Emma knew that any choice she made would shape that bond in a permanent way. One snowy evening, she returned home after work and finally admitted to herself that the fear she felt was not about the medical process or the physical challenge, but the emotional shift that would happen between the three of them. Because once she agreed, their lives would never be exactly the same. She wasn't afraid of the responsibility. She was afraid of how much her heart might change along the way. And that frightened her because she had spent years keeping her emotions under control, staying independent, building a life that felt steady even when it was lonely. But now something inside her was stirring, something that wanted purpose, connection, and meaning in a way she hadn't felt before. She sat on her couch and whispered to herself, "What if this is the right thing? What if I meant to help them?" And then, almost immediately, "But what if I lose myself in the process?" The questions circled endlessly, and she knew she couldn't avoid them much longer. Eventually, she understood that she needed to face Claire and Daniel again. Not to give an answer, but to understand her own heart better with the people who had caused it to shift in the first place. She reached for her phone, her hands shaking slightly, and sent Claire a message asking if they could meet. As soon as she pressed send, a wave of nerves rushed through her because she knew the conversation ahead would be emotional, honest, and impossible to walk away from unchanged. But she also knew she couldn't live in her thoughts forever. She had to face them. She had to face herself. Emma arrived at the small cafe Claire had suggested, a place with warm wooden tables, soft lighting, and the faint scent of coffee and pastries. Her heart racing as she pushed the door open and saw Claire and Daniel already seated. Claire's hands wrapped around a mug as if to steady herself, and Daniel sitting upright, calm but alert, as though he had been expecting this moment as much as she had. And for a brief second, Emma felt the weight of the entire week crash onto her chest, the fear, hope, and uncertainty all blending into a strange mixture that left her breath shallow and fast. As she walked to the table, Claire smiled nervously, the kind of smile that tried to hide worry but failed. And Daniel gave her a small nod, eyes steady and kind, silently telling her it was okay to feel whatever she was feeling. And Emma realized that the decision ahead was not just practical, but deeply emotional, because the connection between them had already changed in subtle ways she hadn't noticed until now. She sat down, and for a moment, no one spoke, letting the background noise of the cafe fill the silence. The distant chatter and the clinking of cups, a contrast to the intense stillness she felt in the center of it all. And she thought about how much she cared for these two people and how much courage it would take to be completely honest about her feelings. Finally, Emma took a deep breath and said quietly, "I need to ask something. I need to understand why you chose me." And Claire's hand tightened around her mug as Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but filled with warmth when he said they had chosen her because they trusted her, because she was one of the kindest, strongest, most compassionate people they knew. Someone who could help them in a way that was not just practical, but meaningful and full of heart. And hearing this made Emma feel both honored and overwhelmed, because the weight of their trust pressed down on her in a way that made her chest ache. Claire added that their journey to start a family had been long, filled with disappointments and moments of quiet despair, and that they had reached a point where hope felt fragile, and they needed someone they trusted completely to walk with them through this next step. And Emma felt her throat tighten. the emotional weight of their words resonating with her own unspoken dreams and longings. She realized in that moment that their request was not about convenience or obligation. It was about love, trust, and the hope of building something larger than themselves. And the gravity of it made her feel both vulnerable and strangely alive. Daniel's eyes held hers as he continued, gently explaining that they didn't want her to feel pressured, that her decision had to come from her own heart, and that they would accept whatever choice she made, but that they hoped she would consider what they were asking not as a burden, but as an opportunity to create a life-changing gift. And Emma felt a swell of emotion she couldn't name, part admiration, part fear, and part longing. She thought of Claire, her best friend, and how many times they had been there for each other through heartbreak, career failures, and moments of quiet loneliness. And suddenly Emma understood that this request was not only about creating a family, but about the depth of their bond, about the trust and love that had been built over years. And she realized how fragile and beautiful that connection truly was. Claire reached across the table, squeezing Emma's hand gently, and said that they wanted everything to be honest, that no one should hide their feelings, because they all knew this journey would bring emotions that were hard to predict. And that honesty would be the foundation that kept them safe and close. And Emma felt a lump in her throat because the words carried both comfort and responsibility. A reminder that love could be gentle, but also demanding. Emma looked at Daniel, noticing how he had always been the steady one, the quiet observer who could sense emotions before they were spoken. And she felt a wave of gratitude for his sincerity and his calm strength, knowing that any choice she made would be met with understanding, but also aware that her own heart might be touched in ways she wasn't ready to name. She realized that agreeing to help them was not just about the practical act of surrogacy, but about opening herself to a new kind of emotional experience, one that could deepen her connection with Claire and Daniel beyond anything she had expected. And that thought made her chest tighten with both fear and anticipation. For the first time that week, she allowed herself to imagine what saying yes could mean. Claire finally experiencing the joy of holding a child, Daniel seeing his dreams of fatherhood come true, and the three of them forming a bond that was emotional, tender, and lasting. And she felt warmth spread through her, a mix of hope and responsibility, a recognition that her choice could bring happiness not just to others, but also to herself in ways she hadn't anticipated. At the same time, she couldn't ignore the fear of the possibility that her feelings could change, that attachment could grow stronger than she expected, or that the journey might be emotionally challenging in ways that tested her boundaries and her heart. And those thoughts kept her silent for a few moments, staring down at her hands as if the answers might be written there. Finally, she spoke, voice soft but steady, saying that she needed time to think, that she wanted to make the choice with her heart fully involved, not out of obligation or guilt. And both Claire and Daniel nodded, their expressions softening with relief and understanding. And Emma felt a sense of lightness mixed with tension, knowing she had taken the first step toward clarity, but had not yet crossed the bridge. They spent the rest of the meeting talking in quiet, careful tones about what the process would involve, the emotional honesty required, and the ways they could support each other regardless of her decision. And Emma felt a mixture of comfort and nervous anticipation, realizing that the conversation had brought them closer in ways words alone could not capture, and that the choice ahead would be life-changing for all of them. As she left the cafe, walking back into the cold winter air, the brisk wind made her feel alive in a way that was both exhilarating and frightening, and she understood that facing them, sharing her doubts, fears, and need for time, had been a crucial step in preparing her heart for whatever decision she would make. Because the journey was not just about helping them bring a child into the world, it was about love, trust, and the courage to face her own emotions honestly. For the first time, Emma realized that the emotional weight of their request was inseparable from her own inner longings, that she could not separate her heart from theirs, and that whatever path she chose, it would demand honesty, courage, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. And that awareness made her step forward into the snowy streets with a mixture of dread and hope, knowing that the next conversation would bring her closer to understanding not only what she wanted, but also who she was willing to be for the people she loved most. She couldn't predict the outcome, couldn't foresee the emotional twists ahead, but she felt certain that honesty and trust would guide them. And that thought carried a quiet strength that pulsed inside her like the first light of dawn breaking over a long, dark night. Emma realized that the choice was hers, but it would not be hers alone. It was intertwined with the lives of Claire and Daniel in ways that could transform all of them. And as she walked, the snow melting softly underfoot, she felt the weight of responsibility, hope, and love pressing on her heart at once. Knowing that the decision she made would shape not only the family they longed for, but also the depth and strength of the friendship she cherished more than she had ever allowed herself to admit. A few days after their cafe conversation, Emma asked Claire and Daniel to meet her at the town park, a place where winter light reflected softly on the snow, children's laughter echoing in the distance, and the crisp air seemed to clear her thoughts as she approached them, nerves fluttering in her stomach while anticipation and fear battled inside her, knowing that this moment would finally mark the turning point of the decision she had been carrying for weeks, the one that had kept her awake at night, running through endless scenarios in her mind, imagining outcomes and consequences she could not yet see. Claire arrived first, bundled in a cozy coat, her cheeks pink from the cold, Daniel following closely, his calm demeanor steadying her racing thoughts. And when their eyes met, Emma felt the warmth of connection that had grown between them over years of friendship, trust, and unspoken understanding, a bond that now carried the weight of life-changing possibility. As they walked together to a quiet spot beneath a tall pine, Emma's hands trembled slightly, her breath forming soft clouds in the frosty air. And she realized that she could no longer hold the answer inside her. She had thought, worried, and imagined every scenario. And now it was time to be honest and brave, not just for them, but for herself. Taking a deep breath, she began, telling them she had thought about everything they had asked, about the hope and trust they had placed in her, and about her own quiet dreams and emotional readiness. And she explained that the decision she had made was not impulsive or taken lightly, that it carried deep meaning and would shape all their lives in ways that could not yet be fully seen, but that she had chosen with her heart fully involved. Claire's eyes widened, and a small gasp escaped her lips as Daniel's expression shifted from calm curiosity to a mixture of relief and gratitude. And in that moment, Emma said the words she had rehearsed silently for nights. She wanted to help them. She wanted to be their surrogate, and she wanted to walk this journey with them, honoring the trust and friendship they shared, even as she acknowledged the emotional responsibility it carried. The three of them stood there in the snow, silence falling over them as the gravity of the decision settled. And for a brief moment, Emma felt the extraordinary weight of love, trust, and hope pressing on her heart, a pressure that was both humbling and empowering. A reminder that life-changing choices were rarely simple, and that the courage to act came from the depth of connection and the willingness to embrace vulnerability. She continued, telling them that if they were to move forward together, honesty would be the foundation of everything, that feelings would need to be shared openly, and that they could not pretend this experience would be easy, but that together they could navigate the emotional complexity with care, empathy, and patience. And both Claire and Daniel nodded slowly, understanding the depth of her request, feeling the truth of her words in the same way she felt the chill of the winter air on her skin. Claire moved closer and hugged her tightly, tears brimming in her eyes, her relief and joy spilling over in an unrestrained wave, while Daniel reached over to squeeze Emma's hand, the steady warmth of his touch grounding her in the moment and reminding her that this journey was not hers alone, that they would face it together with trust, respect, and deep care. Emma felt a surprising lightness begin to replace the anxiety she had carried for so long, a quiet sense of purpose blooming in her chest as she realized that saying yes was not just about helping them achieve a dream, but about opening her own heart to an experience full of meaning, connection, and emotional depth she had not known she needed. A realization that made her feel both exhilarated and profoundly tender. They talked quietly as they walked through the park, discussing what the next steps might look like, how they would support each other, and how communication would guide them through a journey that was as much emotional as it was practical. And in every word, Emma felt the closeness of their bond strengthening, a subtle promise that, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, openly and with care. A shared commitment that filled her heart with warmth and quiet hope. Snowflakes drifted softly around them as they continued their conversation, laughter occasionally escaping when one of them made a gentle joke to lighten the weight of the moment. And Emma realized that even in this decision, there was room for joy, for tenderness, and for the quiet beauty of trust and friendship growing into something even more significant. A reminder that love and connection often arrive in unexpected forms, blending hope with courage and care. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the snow, Emma felt a calm settle over her, a sense of clarity that had eluded her for weeks, knowing she had made a choice that honored her heart, her values, and her deep care for Claire and Daniel. A choice that was both brave and generous, and that marked the beginning of a journey none of them could fully predict, but all of them would walk together, bonded by trust, love, and the quiet power of human connection. She understood in that moment that helping them was not just a favor, but a gift that would ripple through their lives in ways beyond imagination. A gift that required courage, emotional honesty, and commitment. And yet the thought did not frighten her anymore. It filled her with purpose, a sense of belonging, and a profound sense of hope that transcended fear. As they stood beneath the tall pine, watching children play at a distance, snow swirling around their feet, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the trust they had placed in her, for the chance to create something meaningful, and for the rare opportunity to walk a path that blended friendship, love, and life-changing generosity in a way that felt sacred, tender, and beautifully human, knowing that from this moment forward, their lives were intertwined in ways that would always remind them of courage, connection, and the quiet, powerful beauty of making a choice from the heart. She realized that the offer had not been the surprising part at all. The surprise was in the way her heart had opened to trust, love, and the willingness to step into a future where uncertainty and hope coexisted. A realization that left her both vulnerable and strong, aware that the journey ahead would challenge her, reward her, and shape her in ways that only life's most meaningful choices could. And as they finally walked back through the snowy path toward their cars, side by side, talking softly and laughing at small, light moments, Emma knew that this was just the beginning of something remarkable, something that would teach them all about love, trust, patience, and the extraordinary power of shared hope, and that every step forward would be guided by honesty, care, and the deep emotional bonds they had nurtured for years, now strengthened and ready to grow into a new chapter filled with possibility, joy, and life-changing experiences that none of them would ever forget.